I found out my family had stolen my entire life from a stranger's text message at 1:147 p.m. on a Tuesday. One notification. 10 words. I thought you'd want to see this. And a link that would detonate everything I believed about the people I'd sacrificed 15 years for. I was sitting in my Atlanta loft, exhausted from another 70-hour work week, celebrating a major promotion I had no one to share with. When my phone lit up, the message was from someone I barely remembered. An old college acquaintance from Savannah I hadn't spoken to in years. My finger hovered over the delete button. God, I wish I'd pressed it. Instead, I clicked, Wedding of the Century. Charlotte Vance's fairytale at historic Vance Manor. The words punched through my chest. My vision tunneled. The phone slipped in my suddenly sweating hands. Below that headline, in a cascade of professionally shot photos that kept loading and loading and loading, was my entire life story being told with me, edited out of every single frame. My sister Charlotte, who I'd raised more than our mother had, stood radiant in a $10,000 wedding dress on the porch I'd rebuilt, with splinters in my hands and my father's ghost guiding every nail. The gardens we'd planted together, Dad and me, on our knees in the Georgia red clay, now served as a backdrop for a wedding I didn't even know was happening. The mahogany doors I'd stripped, sanded, and restored over one endless summer, crying while I worked because Dad had just died. And this was our last project together. Those doors now gleamed behind strangers, celebrating my erasure. I couldn't breathe. I scrolled, and with each swipe, I watched my life being sold back to me as someone else's accomplishment. 73 photos. I counted every single one. Not one showed my face. Not one mentioned my name. But my work, my sweat, my money, my soul was in every perfectly composed shot. The comment section was worse. Hundreds of them. The Vance family is true Southern royalty. Charlotte is so lucky to have such a supportive family. That venue is absolutely magical. I'm booking my daughter's wedding there next spring. Booking. My childhood home had become a rental property, and I'd learned about it from Instagram comments. I kept scrolling, searching desperately for someone, anyone, who would ask, but who actually restored this house. No one did. I'd been disappeared more thoroughly than if I'd never existed. Then I saw her. My mother, Eleanor, draped in emerald silk that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her smile wide and practiced and perfect, playing the gracious Southern matriarch for the cameras. Next to her stood Nathan Thorne, my sister's fiancé. A man I'd met exactly twice and instantly distrusted, looking like he'd just won the lottery. Which, I would soon discover, he had. And there, barely visible in the background of one shot, hidden behind white tulle, like it was something shameful, there was the historic preservation marker I'd fought 3 years and spent $11,000 of my own money to have installed. The marker that read restored by James and Alexandra Vance. 2003到2018. Someone had literally covered my name with wedding decorations. That's when I knew. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was deliberate. This was calculated. This was my family choosing to erase me while I was busy being the good daughter. The responsible one. The one who sacrificed everything so they could have everything. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you die for, if you've ever discovered that your family saw you as a bank account instead of a human being, if you've ever been erased from your own story while everyone applauded the people who stole it, then you need to hear what happened next. Because what I discovered in the 72 hours after that text message would expose a conspiracy so twisted, so calculated, so evil that it would end with arrests, lawsuits, and my sister's fiancé being dragged out of our family home in handcuffs on what was supposed to be their wedding day. Hit that like button if you want to see how this ends. Subscribe because you're not going to believe the evidence I found. Comment below if you've ever had your family make you feel invisible, because you're not alone. And this story is for every person who's ever been taken for granted by the people who were supposed to love them most. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare actually started, so you can see exactly how a family destroys one of their own in slow motion while smiling for the cameras. I was 12 years old when my father, James Vance, bought the decaying antebellum mansion on the outskirts of Savannah. It was 1,998, and the house wasn't just a disaster. It was a death trap. The roof had more holes than shingles. The foundation was crumbling so badly that inspectors said the whole structure could collapse in the next strong storm. Historic preservationists had declared it a lost cause. Not worth saving. Better to bulldoze it and build something new. But my father, he saw something no one else could see. He was a master carpenter. A craftsman who'd learned his trade from his grandfather, going back generations. He believed that every building had a soul, and that soul was worth fighting for. A house is only honest when the hands that build it are honest. He told me that first day, standing in the weed-choked yard, with the house looming behind him like a corpse. I was the oldest daughter, the one who'd been following him to job sites since I could walk, who could hand him the right tool before he asked for it, who'd rather read blueprints than YM magazine. My younger sister Charlotte was only 5 then, more interested in her plastic princess dolls than anything involving dirt or manual labor. My mother Eleanor managed the books and entertained the potential donors Dad needed to make the project work, always dressed impeccably, even when we were standing in ruins. Always concerned with how things looked rather than how things were. My father put his calloused hand on my shoulder that day and made me a promise. This house is going to be our masterpiece. Maddie, yours and mine. We're going to bring it back to life the right way. No shortcuts. No compromises. Just honest work that'll outlast both of us. I believed him. I believed every word. And for the next 15 years, that house became my second education. My second home. My second heartbeat. I was 12 when my father, James Vance, bought the decaying antebellum mansion on the outskirts of Savannah. It was 1,998, and the house was a disaster. The roof leaked, the foundation was crumbling, and the historic preservationists had declared it a lost cause. But my father saw something else. He was a master carpenter, a craftsman who believed that every building had a soul worth saving. A house is only honest when the hands that build it are honest. He told me that first day, standing in the weed-choked yard. I was the oldest daughter, the one who followed him around with a toolbox, who learned to read blueprints before I learned algebra. Charlotte was only 5 then, more interested in her dolls than in restoration work. My mother managed the books and entertained potential donors, always dressed impeccably, always concerned with appearances. For the next 15 years, that house became my second education. While other teenagers went to proms and football games, I spent weekends learning Victorian molding techniques and how to restore original hardwood floors. My father taught me everything. How to identify load-bearing walls, how to match 100-year-old paint colors, how to preserve history while making a building livable. Every summer through high school and college, I worked on Vance Manor. When I went to architecture school, I wrote my thesis on its restoration. When my father died of a heart attack my senior year, I inherited not just his tools but his mission. The house was 70% complete. I promised him, standing by his hospital bed, that I would finish it. After graduation, I took a job at a prestigious firm in Atlanta, but every spare moment and every spare dollar went back to Savannah. I visited twice a month, working weekends and holidays. I hired contractors, paid craftsmen, sourced period-appropriate materials. My mother managed the property, living there with Charlotte, who was finishing college. I sent money religiously, $2,000 every month for maintenance, utilities, and ongoing restoration. The house was in my name, per my father's will. But I wanted it to be a family home, a place where all of us could connect with his legacy. I was building something beautiful. I thought we all were. Charlotte graduated and drifted. She tried fashion, then marketing, then event planning, never sticking with anything. She was beautiful, charming, effortlessly social, in a way I'd never been. My mother doted on her. Always had. It was obvious even when we were children. Charlotte needs more support. Eleanor would say when I questioned why my sister never contributed to the house fund, she's finding herself. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks, then driving 4 hours to Savannah to repair storm damage or supervise electricians. I told myself it was fine. I was the older sister. This was my role. Then, Charlotte met Nathan Thorne at a charity gala in Charleston. He was 42, divorced, and wealthy, the CEO of Thorn Enterprises, a development company specializing in luxury event venues. Their relationship moved fast. Within 6 months, they were engaged. My mother was ecstatic. Finally, she said over the phone, Charlotte is settling down with someone stable. I met Nathan twice, before the wedding planning began. Both times, something felt off. The way he gripped Charlotte's elbow when she spoke, the way he interrupted her stories, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. But Charlotte seemed happy, or at least she seemed decided. And I was busy with a major project, so I let it go. The first real warning sign came 9 months before that devastating blog post. I called my mother to discuss replacing the roof on the east wing. "Oh, darling," Eleanor said, her voice bright. "Nathan's taking care of that. He has contractors coming next week." I felt a flicker of unease. I didn't approve any contractors. The roof needs specific materials to maintain historic integrity. My mother laughed. That tinkling laugh she reserved for when she thought I was being difficult. "Madison, dear, Nathan knows what he's doing. He owns several historic properties. You're so busy in Atlanta. Let him help." I should have pushed back harder. Instead, I said, "Just make sure they use copper flashing, not aluminum, and send me the contractor information so I can review their credentials." She agreed. She never sent anything. Over the next months, my calls went increasingly unanswered. When Eleanor did pick up, she was vague about the work being done. "Everything's moving along beautifully," she'd say. "Nathan's been wonderful." When I asked for photos or receipts, she'd change the subject or promise to send them later. My checks for monthly maintenance kept clearing. The mortgage was being paid. I assumed everything was fine. I was drowning in my own work, designing the restoration of 2 major Atlanta landmarks. I won awards. My firm promoted me to senior architect. I was succeeding in every way that mattered to me. I just didn't realize I was succeeding alone. The invitation to Charlotte's wedding arrived by mail, not even a phone call. It was formal, embossed, expensive. The ceremony would be at Vance Manor. Naturally, an intimate celebration, it said, for 150 guests. I called Charlotte immediately. "Hey, congratulations," I said, trying to sound warm despite the sting of finding out this way. "I didn't realize you'd set a date." Charlotte's voice was strained. "It happened fast. Nathan wanted spring. You know how he is." I didn't, actually. But I said, "Of course, what can I do to help?" There was a pause. "Actually, Maddie, Mom and Nathan are handling everything. They've hired a wedding planner. It's all very organized." Another pause. "We thought you'd be too busy anyway." Too busy. For my only sister's wedding. At the house I'd spent half my life restoring. I swallowed the hurt. "I'm never too busy for family." "Charlotte, I'll take time off. What dates do you need me there?" She hesitated again. "The thing is, the wedding planner has it all choreographed. There's really nothing for you to do. Just show up the day of." Something in her tone made me ask, "Have I done something wrong?" She exhaled. "No. Maddie, you haven't done anything. That's kind of the point. You're always working. You're always in Atlanta. Mom says it's easier if we just handle things here." My mother's words, coming through my sister's mouth. I should have driven to Savannah that night. Instead, I said, "Okay, just send me the schedule. I'll be there." The schedule never came. Neither did any follow-up calls. I texted Charlotte twice, asking about bridesmaid dresses, about where I should stay, about whether she needed anything. She responded with one-word answers, or not at all. I told myself she was just stressed, that weddings made people crazy. I buried myself in work. The months passed. I sent my monthly checks. The house fund I'd established had grown to over $80,000, earmarked for the final restoration phases. I felt proud, knowing that when Charlotte's wedding was over, I could finish my father's dream. Then came that Tuesday night. That blog post. Those photos of my life, repackaged as someone else's story. I read every comment. What a stunning venue. The Vance family really knows how to preserve Southern heritage. Charlotte is living every girl's dream. I clicked through to the venue's new website. The Thorne Vance Wedding Venue, available for bookings. Packages starting at $15,000. They had created a business out of my home. They had turned my father's legacy into a rental property, and they had done it without telling me. I called my mother. It was nearly midnight, but I didn't care. She answered on the fourth ring. Her voice groggy. Madison, what's wrong? Everything. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, as calmly as I could, I saw the article about Charlotte's wedding. She perked up immediately. Oh, isn't it wonderful? The photographer really captured the magic. I closed my eyes. Why wasn't I told about any of this? A pause. Told about what? Darling. My hands clenched around the phone. The wedding? The planning? The fact that you've turned Vance Manor into a commercial venue? She sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. Charlotte didn't want to bother you. She knows how busy you are. And the venue idea was Nathan's. He's invested so much in improvements. This way the house can actually pay for itself instead of being a constant drain. A drain. My father's masterpiece. My life's work. A drain. I kept my voice level. The house is in my name. Mom, any commercial use requires my permission. And what improvements? I never approved any major work. Another sigh. Well, Nathan has done extensive renovations. New kitchen. Updated bathrooms. Professional landscaping. The house needed it. Madison. It was looking tired. Tired. I had been restoring it with period-appropriate materials, maintaining its historic character. What do you mean by renovations? My mother's voice took on an edge. Modern updates. Things guests expect. Really. Madison. You should be grateful. Nathan has saved us all a fortune. Saved us. With my money? At my house. I asked the question I was dreading. Did you sign anything? Any contracts or agreements with Nathan's silence? Then, carefully, we may have adjusted some paperwork. For tax purposes, Nathan's accountant recommended it. My stomach dropped. What kind of paperwork? She was getting defensive now. Just boring legal things. You know I don't understand all that. Nathan said it would help with the business structure. I felt cold. Did you sign my name to anything? She laughed. But it sounded forced. Don't be dramatic. Darling, everything was done properly. Nathan had lawyers. Now, don't you want to hear about the wedding plans? Charlotte wants white roses and... I hung up. My hands were shaking. I pulled up the property records website and searched for Vance Manor. It took 3 tries to enter the address correctly because my fingers wouldn't work right. When the record loaded, I stared at the screen for a full minute, unable to process what I was seeing. The property was now listed as jointly owned by Alexandra Madison Vance and Thorne Enterprises, LLC. The transfer date was 8 months ago. There was a scanned document attached, a quitclaim deed, bearing my signature. Except I had never signed any quitclaim deed. I had never even seen this document. I zoomed in on the signature. It was perfect. Too perfect. It looked exactly like my handwriting. But I had never written it. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I threw clothes into a bag, called my boss to say I had a family emergency, and got in my car. The drive from Atlanta to Savannah takes 4.5 hours. I made it in 3 and 45 minutes. Every mile. I remembered something else. The vague excuses, the unreturned calls, the way Charlotte's voice had sounded strained when she said Nathan was handling everything. My mother's casual mention of paperwork. Nathan's tight grip on Charlotte's arm at Christmas dinner. The pieces assembled themselves into a picture I didn't want to see. I had been erased. Systematically. Deliberately. Completely. They had taken my name off the legacy I'd built. They had forged my signature to steal my inheritance. They had turned my father's dream into their business opportunity. And they had done it while I was busy working. Busy succeeding. Busy being too blind to see that my family was eating me alive. The sun was rising over the Savannah River when I turned onto the long oak-lined drive leading to Vance Manor. The house appeared through the morning mist, and my breath caught. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And it was all wrong. The exterior had been painted a gleaming white, erasing the historically accurate warm gray my father and I had matched from original paint samples. The gardens were manicured to within an inch of their lives, losing the wild romantic quality we'd cultivated. A massive sign stood by the front gate, professionally printed, reading the Thorn Vance wedding venue with a phone number and website. In the circular drive sat a catering truck. People were setting up chairs on the lawn. I parked and got out. A young woman with a clipboard approached me, smiling professionally. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this is a private event venue. If you're interested in booking, you'll need to." I cut her off. "I own this house." Her smile faltered. "Oh, are you with the Vance family? The Vance family?" As if I weren't part of it. Before I could answer, I heard my mother's voice calling from the veranda. "Madison, what a surprise, you should have called ahead." She descended the steps, dressed in cream linen, every hair in place, looking like she was welcoming a guest to a garden party, rather than facing the daughter she'd betrayed. I walked toward her, my legs feeling disconnected from my body. "We need to talk. Now." Eleanor's smile didn't waver. "Of course, darling. But perhaps after the photo shoot, Charlotte's photographer is here. And we're running behind schedule." "Photo shoot?" "Of course." I looked past her and saw Charlotte on the porch, wearing what was clearly a wedding dress fitting, surrounded by people with cameras and reflectors. My sister looked up, saw me, and her face went pale. "Maddie," she called, her voice too bright, too false. "You came." I hadn't been invited to come any earlier. I'd seen my sister's wedding announced in a blog post, but I swallowed that and said, "Can we talk, all of us?" Charlotte glanced at our mother, then at Nathan, who had appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. We're kind of in the middle of something." I felt the rage building, but I kept my voice steady. "I know. You're in the middle of commercializing my house without my permission. So yes, we need to talk. Right now." The photographer and assistant sensed the tension and found reasons to be elsewhere. Nathan descended the steps. All Southern charm. "Madison, so good to see you. We've been meaning to call. There's been some confusion about the property arrangements." Confusion. That's what he called forgery. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what I'd missed before. This was a man who was used to getting what he wanted. A man who saw people as assets or obstacles. Right now, I was an obstacle. "There's no confusion," I said. "There's theft. You filed a fraudulent deed transfer using a forged signature." Eleanor gasped. "Madison, how could you say such a thing? Nathan has been nothing but generous." Generous. He'd stolen my house and she called him generous. I turned to my mother. "Did you sign my name to those documents?" Her face flushed. "I did what was necessary for the family. You were never here." "Madison, someone had to make decisions." The admission hung in the air. My own mother had forged my signature. Charlotte started crying, mascara running down her face. The makeup artist rushed over with tissues. I looked at the three of them. This family I'd sacrificed for, and felt something in me crack open. "I need all the financial records," I said. "Every invoice, every receipt, every bank statement related to this property for the past year." Nathan stepped forward. "Now, let's not be hasty. We can work this out like adults." I held my ground. "Give me the records by 5 p.m. today, or I'm calling the police and a lawyer. Your choice." I turned and walked back to my car, my entire body trembling. As I reached the gate, I heard Charlotte call out, "Maddie, wait, please." I didn't wait. I couldn't. If I stopped, I'd fall apart, and I couldn't afford to fall apart yet. I drove into downtown Savannah and sat in my car in a parking lot by the river, watching the water flow past. My phone rang constantly. Eleanor. Charlotte. A number I didn't recognize that was probably Nathan. I didn't answer. Instead, I called Dan Evans, a friend from college who'd become a property lawyer. "Dan, I need help," I said when he answered. And then I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, then said quietly, "Madison, what they did is fraud. Clear cut. You could press charges. I felt dizzy. I know, but they're my family. He was gentle. That's why you're calling a lawyer instead of the police. Let me make some calls. Don't go back to that house alone. I spent the day in a coffee shop. Laptop open, going through every transaction I could access. My bank statements showed my $2,000 monthly transfers, everyone clearing. But when I checked the property's utility bills, which were automatically charged to my credit card, I noticed something. The amounts had tripled over the past 6 months. When I called the electric company, they cheerfully informed me that the Thorn Vance event venue was one of their largest commercial accounts. Commercial account. Using my credit. Billed to me. I'd been funding their business venture without even knowing it existed. I pulled up the venue's website again and really examined it. Professional photos of the house. All the rooms I'd restored. Marketed as exclusive Southern elegance. Testimonials from happy couples. A booking calendar that showed they'd been hosting events for at least 4 months. I did quick math. $15,000 minimum per event. 2 events most weekends. They'd made over $200,000. Using my property. My restoration work. My legacy. And they hadn't told me, or paid me a single cent. I was funding their business while they were profiting from my life's work. Dan called back at 4 p.m. I've been through the county records. The deed transfer is definitely fraudulent. The signature doesn't match your notarized documents on file, but Madison, there's more. My hands went cold. What he sighed. There are liens on the property. Business loans totaling $300,000. All filed in the past 9 months. With both your name and Thorn Enterprises as co-borrowers. Your signature is on those documents too. I felt like I was drowning. I never borrowed anything. Dan, I've never even seen those loan documents. His voice was grim. Someone's been very busy building a paper trail. And if Thorn Enterprise defaults, you're legally liable. I sat in that coffee shop as the afternoon light faded, and I understood the full scope of what had been done to me. This wasn't just about stealing a house. It was about burying me in debt while they profited. It was about making sure I couldn't fight back without destroying my own credit and financial future. It was brilliant. In a sociopathic way, Nathan had positioned himself to bleed me dry, and my family had helped him do it. My mother had forged my signature. My sister had stood by and let it happen. They had sold me out for the illusion of elegance and the promise of profit. That night, I checked into a hotel rather than face any of them. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The betrayal, the rage, the grief. My father had spent his life teaching me that honest work builds honest things. He'd believed in integrity, in preservation, in doing right by the past. My mother and sister had taken everything he valued and turned it into a scam. They'd used his memory, his house, and his daughter to make money and keep up appearances. I cried for the first time since I'd seen that blog post. Harsh sobs that shook my whole body. Then I got up, washed my face, and opened my laptop. If they wanted to play with documents and legal maneuvers, I would show them what a real architect could do. I spent the night building a case file, every email I'd ever sent about the house, every receipt and invoice I'd kept, every photograph documenting the restoration work, the original will from my father, leaving the property to me, every bank statement showing my monthly payments. I created a timeline, a paper trail of my own, proving my continuous ownership and investment. By dawn, I had 200 pages of documentation. Then I started searching for something else. I needed to know who Nathan Thorn really was. What I found made me sick. Nathan's previous company had filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago. After allegations of investor fraud, he'd started Thorn Enterprises immediately after, using his ex-wife's money, and she'd filed for divorce within a year, citing financial abuse in the court documents. The divorce records were sealed, but the bankruptcy filing was public, and it painted a picture of a man who built empires on other people's money and walked away when they collapsed. He was doing it again. And this time, I was the foundation he was planning to crumble. Dan called at 8 a.m. I've got a friend at the DA's office. She wants to meet with you. Can you come to my office at 10? I was there at 9:30. The district attorney's investigator, a woman named Sarah Chen, listened to my story with an increasingly concerned expression. When I showed her the loan documents with my forged signature, she made a phone call. When I showed her Nathan's bankruptcy history, she made another. "Ms. Vance," she said finally, "what you're describing is wire fraud, identity theft, and potentially money laundering. If you're willing to press charges, we can open an investigation." I looked at my hands, my father's hands, calloused from honest work. "It's my family," I said. She nodded. "I understand. But ask yourself this. If they're willing to do this to you, who else might they hurt?" I thought of Charlotte, pale and crying in that wedding dress. I thought of her strained voice on the phone, the way Nathan gripped her arm, the way she'd seemed like a different person since meeting him. I thought of future couples who would book the Thorn Vance venue, not knowing they were dealing with a con artist. I thought of my father, who'd believed the house should stand as a testament to honesty. "I'll press charges," I said. "Tell me what you need." The next week was a blur of statements and documentation. Sarah Chen's investigation moved quickly. They discovered that Nathan had been investigated by federal authorities 2 years earlier for similar schemes in Charleston. They found evidence that he'd forged documents for other business ventures. They uncovered a pattern of targeting women with assets, marrying into families with property, and systematically stealing everything he could. I was just his latest mark, and Charlotte was his access point. When I learned that, I tried calling my sister. She didn't answer. I tried my mother instead. Eleanor picked up, her voice cold. "I hope you're happy. Madison, you've ruined your sister's wedding." Not hello. Not how are you. Just blame. I felt strangely calm. I didn't ruin anything. "Mom, Nathan Thorne is under investigation for fraud. He forged my signature on legal documents. He took out loans in my name. He stole from me. And you helped him." She made a dismissive sound. "You're being dramatic." Nathan explained everything. Those were standard business practices. You just don't understand how commerce works. Standard business practices. Identity theft and fraud were standard business practices. "Mom, did he tell you he declared bankruptcy after defrauding investors? Did he tell you his ex-wife filed a restraining order? Did he tell you he's done this before?" Silence. Then, defensively, "People make mistakes. He's changed. Charlotte loves him." I closed my eyes. Charlotte is a victim. Just like me. Maybe worse. Because she's going to marry him. Eleanor's voice went sharp. "Don't you dare. Charlotte is finally settling down with a good man. You've always been jealous of her happiness." Jealous. I'd been jealous while being robbed, while having my identity stolen, while watching my life's work be monetized without my permission. I'm not jealous. "Mom, I'm trying to protect what's left of our family, but I can't do that alone. And you've made it clear whose side you're on." She hung up. I sat holding the phone, feeling the last thread connecting me to my family snap. Dan called an hour later. "The DA is moving forward. They're issuing subpoenas for Nathan's business records. But Madison, there's something you should know. Your mother has hired a lawyer. She's claiming you gave verbal permission for all the changes to the property." Of course she was. Eleanor would protect Charlotte, and Charlotte was choosing Nathan. So Eleanor would protect Nathan. I was the outsider, the difficult daughter, the one who'd always been too serious, too focused on work, too much like my father. My mother would sacrifice me to maintain the appearance of family unity. I made a decision then. I called Charlotte one more time. "Miraculously," she answered. Her voice was small. "Maddie, I softened despite everything." "Charlotte, are you okay?" She started crying immediately. "I don't know. Everything's falling apart. Nathan says you're trying to destroy us. Mom says you've always been jealous. But Maddie, some of the things they're saying about Nathan, about his past." She was starting to see. "Charlotte, listen to me. You need to leave. Right now. Come stay with me." Her voice turned fearful. "I can't. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Everything's planned. Everyone's coming. What would people think? What would people think?" There it was. The core of everything wrong with our family. Appearances mattered more than truth. Reputation mattered more than safety. "Charlotte, I love you. I will always love you. But I can't watch you marry someone who's conning you. Nathan has done this before. He targets women with family money, and he bleeds them dry. Please, just look at the public records. Look at his bankruptcy filing. Look at his ex-wife's divorce petition. Then decide. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, I have to go. Nathan just got home. She hung up before I could say anything else. That night, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should see this." The email contained a video file with no message. I almost deleted it as spam. But something made me click it. The video was shaky, clearly filmed on a phone, and the audio was muffled. It took me a moment to realize what I was watching. It was inside Vance Manor. In the front parlor my father had loved. Nathan was there, standing over a table, covered with documents. Charlotte was there too, and she was crying. Nathan's voice was harsh. Ugly. Sign it. Charlotte. We've been over this. Charlotte's voice was barely audible. But it's Maddie's house. We can't just... Nathan's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, twisting it. Your sister abandoned this place. She doesn't care about it. We're making it something valuable. Charlotte tried to pull away. You're hurting me. Nathan didn't let go. Sign the fucking papers. There was a long pause. Then Charlotte's broken voice. Okay. I'll sign. Nathan released her and smiled. Suddenly charming again. That's my girl. See, it's not so hard. Your sister doesn't need to know everything. This is better for everyone. The video ended. I sat staring at the blank screen, my whole body shaking with rage. He'd coerced her. Maybe Eleanor had forged my signature. But Nathan had forced Charlotte to be complicit. My little sister, who I'd been angry at, who I'd thought had betrayed me, was as much a victim as I was. I forwarded the video to Sarah Chen immediately. She called back within minutes. Where did you get this? I told her about the anonymous email. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Madison, this changes things. This is evidence of domestic violence and coercion. We need to find your sister and get her somewhere safe. I tried calling Charlotte again. No answer. I tried my mother. She picked up, and I could hear party noises in the background. What now? Madison, we're hosting the rehearsal dinner. The rehearsal dinner. The wedding was this weekend. Mom! I need to talk to Charlotte. It's urgent. Eleanor sighed dramatically. She's busy. And frankly, I think you've caused enough disruption. After the wedding, maybe things can calm down. After the wedding, after Charlotte legally tied herself to an abuser and a con artist, Mom, please listen. I have evidence that Nathan has been hurting Charlotte. She needs help. My mother's voice went icy. Nathan has been nothing but kind to our family. You're making things up because you can't stand that Charlotte found someone successful. Don't call here again. She hung up. I realized then that I couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. And I couldn't reach someone that my mother was actively keeping from me. All I could do was make sure the truth came out. The day before the wedding, Sarah Chen called. We have enough to arrest Nathan Thorne on fraud charges. We're executing a search warrant on the property tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. The wedding was tomorrow afternoon. Will that stop the wedding? She hesitated. That's not really our concern. Our concern is the fraud. But yes, it's likely the wedding won't happen as planned. I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. This was going to humiliate Charlotte publicly. It was going to expose our family's dysfunction to all of Savannah society. My mother would never forgive me, but my sister would be safe. And the truth would be known. The next morning, I woke to my phone exploding with notifications. Text messages, voicemails, social media tags. I opened the first one, from the same unknown number that had sent the video. It was a link to a live stream. The title read Thorne Wedding Disaster. My hands were shaking as I clicked it. The video showed Vance Manor's grand porch, decorated with white roses and tulle. Charlotte was there in her wedding dress, looking like a princess. Nathan was there in his tuxedo, looking furious. And they were screaming at each other. The audio was unclear, but the body language was unmistakable. Nathan grabbed Charlotte's arm again, yanking her toward him. She pulled back, and her bouquet fell, white roses scattering across the floor. Then Nathan slapped her. The sound was audible even through the phone's speaker. Charlotte's head snapped to the side, and she stumbled. Gasps from the gathered guests. Someone screamed. Nathan reached for Charlotte again, but she shoved him back with surprising force. "Don't touch me," her voice carried clearly now. "I'm done. I'm done with all of this." She ripped off her engagement ring and threw it at him, then turned and ran. The last image was of Nathan standing alone on the porch, red-faced with rage, while wedding guests pulled out their phones to record. The live stream had 60,000 viewers. By the time I finished watching, it had doubled. My phone rang. "Sarah Jen, have you seen?" She sounded tense. "I'm seeing it now." I felt sick. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to end. Nathan Thorne is in custody. He was arrested an hour ago at the venue. But Madison, you need to know that the incident between him and Charlotte happened before we arrived. Someone leaked the wedding drama online, and it's gone viral. I pulled up social media. Wedding disaster was trending. The clip of Nathan hitting Charlotte had been shared tens of thousands of times. The comments ranged from supportive of Charlotte to vicious toward my family. "Where's Charlotte now?" I asked. Sarah's voice softened. She was taken to the hospital for evaluation. Physical injuries are minor, but she's pretty shaken up. I drove to the hospital immediately. Eleanor was in the waiting room, for once looking disheveled. Her careful facade cracked. When she saw me, her face hardened. "This is your fault. You couldn't leave well enough alone." I didn't have the energy to argue. "Where is she?" Eleanor pointed down the hall. "They're discharging her soon. She won't talk to anyone." I walked past my mother without another word. Charlotte was in a private room, still wearing the wedding dress. Mascara streaked down her face. When she saw me, she started crying harder. I sat beside her and took her hand. She didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. Maddie." I squeezed her hand. "You have nothing to be sorry for. None of this is your fault." She shook her head, tears falling faster. I knew. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. But he was so charming. And Mom loved him. And I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. Then he started pushing me to do things. To sign things. He said you didn't care about the house. That you'd abandoned us. He said if I loved him, I'd help him make it profitable. She looked up at me, her eyes devastated. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be important. I wanted Mom to be proud of me like she was when I got engaged. My heart broke for her. "Charlotte, you've always been important. You don't need a man or a wedding or Mom's approval to matter." She wiped her eyes. "You always knew who you were. Maddie, you were like Dad. You had your work, your purpose. I just had my looks and Mom's ambitions for me." Nathan saw that. He used it. We sat in silence for a while. Then Charlotte said quietly, "I saw the legal documents. I know Mom forged your signature. I should have stopped her. But I was too scared. She said you wouldn't mind. That you were too busy anyway. That it was easier to just handle things ourselves." Eleanor had poisoned the well thoroughly, turning my absence into abandonment, my trust into indifference. Before I could respond, Eleanor appeared in the doorway. She looked at both of us, and her expression shifted through several emotions before settling on brittle composure. "Well," she said, "I suppose you're both satisfied now. The entire county knows our business. The Vance name is ruined." I stared at my mother. "The Vance name was ruined when you forged my signature to steal my inheritance. The Vance name was ruined when you helped a con artist prey on your daughter. The Vance name was ruined when you chose appearances over honesty." Eleanor flinched. Charlotte spoke up, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. "It's over. Mom, Nathan's arrested. The venue is closed. Everyone knows what happened. We can't pretend anymore." Eleanor looked between us, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not fear for us, but fear of what this meant for her. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, and she sounded lost. "Everyone will talk. How do I face anyone?" I stood up. "That's what you're worried about, how you'll face people, Mom. Your daughter was just assaulted by her fiancé. Your other daughter's identity was stolen. And you're worried about gossip. Something in Eleanor seemed to collapse. She sat down heavily in the visitor's chair. I just wanted our family to be respected. To be successful. Your father was a carpenter. We had nothing. I wanted more for my girls. And there it was. The root of everything. Eleanor had been ashamed of my father's honest work. Ashamed of their middle-class life. Desperate to climb into a social circle that would never fully accept her. She'd pushed Charlotte toward Nathan because he represented wealth and status. She'd dismissed my work because preservation didn't carry the same prestige as development. She'd forged my signature because I was supposed to be the dutiful daughter who sacrificed for the family's image. She'd built her entire identity on a foundation of pretense. And now it was all crumbling. The next few days were a media circus. The wedding disaster went viral beyond anything I could have imagined. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about domestic violence and financial fraud. Nathan's arrest made headlines. His previous bankruptcy and the ongoing federal investigation into his business practices came to light. Several other women came forward with similar stories. Charlotte was just his latest target. The Savannah social scene that had celebrated the engagement now acted horrified, claiming they'd always suspected something was off. Eleanor retreated into the house and refused to see anyone. Charlotte stayed with me at my hotel. We talked for hours. Really talked. For the first time in years. She told me how Nathan had isolated her gradually, cutting her off from friends, making her dependent on him financially, convincing her that her family didn't understand their love. She told me about the times he'd grabbed her too hard, the times he'd screamed at her, the times he'd made her feel worthless. She told me she'd almost called off the wedding a dozen times but felt trapped by the momentum, by the expense, by everyone's expectations. I kept thinking, if I can just get through the wedding, it will be better, she said. But seeing you that day, seeing how hurt you were, something clicked. This wasn't going to get better. A week after the disaster, I received a summons to appear at the county courthouse. Eleanor had filed a lawsuit, claiming I had abandoned the property and had no right to make decisions about it. She was being advised by lawyers Nathan had hired before his arrest, and they were trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Dan met me at the courthouse steps. "This is a Hail Mary," he said. "They have no case, but they're going to try to drag this out. Make it expensive for you." I looked up at the courthouse, thinking of my father. Let them try. I have nothing but time and truth. The preliminary hearing was brief but ugly. Eleanor's lawyer painted me as an absentee daughter who'd neglected family obligations. My lawyer presented the forged documents, the video evidence of Nathan coercing Charlotte, and the paper trail of my continuous financial support and ownership. The judge was not amused. She denied Eleanor's motion and ordered a full forensic accounting of all finances related to the property. She also noted that Eleanor could face criminal charges for the forgery. As we left the courthouse, Eleanor tried to approach me. "Madison, please, can't we work this out privately?" I looked at my mother. Really looked at her. And saw a stranger. "You forged my signature. You stole from me. You prioritized a con artist over your daughters. There's nothing private left to work out." That afternoon, I went to the property records office with Dan. We had the fraudulent deed transfer officially voided. We filed new paperwork establishing my sole ownership, reinforced with additional documentation. We filed liens against Thorne Enterprises for the money they'd made using my property. Dan put a forensic accountant on retainer to track down every dollar. Then I drove to Vance Manor. The property was quiet. The wedding decorations half removed, wilting in the heat. The Thorne Vance wedding venue sign was still up. I took a hammer from my car and knocked it down myself. The sound echoing across the empty lawn. Inside, the house was a disaster. The renovations Nathan had done were cheap and damaging. He'd painted over original molding with latex paint. He'd installed modern light fixtures that didn't match the period. He'd torn out part of the kitchen my father had meticulously restored to install commercial appliances. The library had been converted to a bridal suite. The built-in bookshelves covered with drywall. I walked through every room, cataloging the destruction, photographing the damage. This was going to take years to fix, and tens of thousands of dollars. But I would fix it. I had to. In my father's old study, I found boxes of documents, financial records, contracts, receipts. I started going through them, and the scope of the theft became clear. Nathan and Eleanor had taken out loans using forged documents. They'd spent over $400,000 on renovations, events, and personal expenses, all while I was sending my monthly maintenance checks. The venue had generated nearly $300,000 in revenue over 9 months, none of which had been reported as income or paid to me. They'd created an entire parallel business structure designed to drain my assets while enriching themselves, but I also found something else in those boxes. A folder marked Charlotte's account. Inside were bank statements for an account I didn't know existed, in Charlotte's name, but with Eleanor listed as co-owner. The deposits told a story. Nathan had been paying Charlotte a salary for event coordination, but every penny had been withdrawn by Eleanor. My sister hadn't seen a dime of the money Nathan claimed to be paying her. She'd been used just like I had. Just differently. Eleanor had been embezzling from both her daughters, living off our money, while Nathan built his empire on our property. I called Charlotte and told her what I'd found. She was silent for a long time. I never saw any of that money. She finally said, Nathan said he was paying me, but Mom said she was putting it away for my future. I believed her. We were both victims of the same con, just playing different roles. That night, I sat in the empty house and made a list. Everything that needed to be fixed. Everything that needed to be restored. Everything that needed to be let go. At the top of the list, I wrote, decide what the house should become. Dan called the next morning. The forensic accounting is complete. Between the forged loans, the unreported venue income, and your mother's account withdrawals, you're owed just over $800,000. I felt dizzy. That's impossible. Where did all that money come from? Dan's voice was grim. Nathan was laundering money through the venue. The FBI has been watching him for months. Your property was one of several businesses he was using to clean illegal income. When they seize his assets, you'll likely recover most of what you're owed. But Madison, there's something else. Your mother's withdrawals total nearly $200,000. She spent it on travel, luxury goods, and supporting Charlotte's wedding expenses. She's broke. The lawsuit was her last attempt to keep access to the house. I hung up and looked around the empty manor. My father had bought this house with honest money and filled it with honest work. Eleanor had turned it into a front for criminal activity. Nathan had used it to hide stolen money. Charlotte had been paraded through it like a prize, and I had been written out of the story entirely. But I was still standing. I was still here, and the house was still mine. I called Sarah Chen. I want to press charges against my mother for fraud and identity theft. There was a pause. Are you sure? She sounded surprised. She's your mother. I looked at my father's carpenter's level, still hanging on the study wall. That's exactly why I have to do this. Someone in this family has to value honesty. Eleanor was arrested 3 days later. The scene was almost theatrical. Police arrived at Vance Manor to find her dressed for an afternoon tea, as if she could maintain appearances through sheer will. I wasn't there, but Charlotte called me, sobbing. Maddie, she's asking for you. Please. I drove over. Eleanor was in the back of a police car, and she looked smaller somehow, diminished. When she saw me, she mouthed please through the window. I walked up to the car and looked at my mother. You taught Charlotte and me that family was everything, I said, but you never taught us that family requires honesty. That's the lesson Dad tried to teach. And you erased it. You erased him. You erased me. You nearly destroyed Charlotte. Sonu. Mom, I won't help you this time. As the police car drove away, Charlotte stood beside me on the porch. What happens now? She asked. I looked at the house. My father's dream. Damaged but still standing. Now we rebuild. Not the way Mom wanted, with lies and facades. And not the way Nathan wanted, with exploitation and greed. We rebuild the way Dad would have wanted. Honestly, Charlotte wiped her eyes. I don't know how to do that. I don't know who I am without all the pretense. I put my arm around her. Then we'll figure it out together. That's what Dad would have wanted too. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Nathan was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and received a 7-year sentence. Eleanor pled guilty to forgery and identity theft in exchange for probation and restitution. She was required to pay back the money she'd stolen. Though she had no means to do so, the court ordered her to surrender any claim to the property and to stay away from me unless I initiated contact. Charlotte testified at both trials, and I watched her transform from a frightened girl to a woman taking control of her narrative. She cut her hair short, started therapy, and enrolled in classes at the local community college. She didn't know what she wanted to study yet, but she was discovering what she didn't want, which was a start. As for the house, I spent weeks deciding what to do with it. Dan suggested selling it, using the money to start fresh. Charlotte suggested keeping it as a private home, a place where we could reconnect, but neither option felt right. One night, I was walking through the empty rooms, thinking about my father's words. A house is only honest when the hands that build it are honest. I thought about all the dishonest hands that had touched this place. Nathan's hands, taking and destroying. Eleanor's hands, forging and stealing. And then I thought about the honest hands. My father's, teaching me to restore Anastasia. My own, learning from him. Charlotte's, trying to find their purpose. And I thought about other hands that might need a place to build something honest. Women who'd been betrayed like Charlotte, women who'd been used like I had, women who needed a place to start over, to learn that they were worth more than what had been done to them. I called Sarah Chen. What would it take to turn this house into a shelter? A place for women escaping domestic violence or financial abuse. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Madison, that's perfect. That's exactly what this house should be." 6 months later, Haven House opened its doors. The restoration wasn't complete, but the essential work was done. The house was safe, warm, and welcoming. We had funding from the seizure of Nathan's assets, grants from domestic violence organizations, and donations from people who'd seen Charlotte's story in the news and wanted to help. Eleanor's court-ordered restitution payments went directly into the Haven House operating fund. It felt right, using the money she'd stolen to help the women she'd failed to protect. Charlotte worked part-time at the house, helping with intake and support services. She was studying social work at the community college, finding purpose in her own healing by helping others. We'd converted my father's library back to its original purpose, but now it housed books on legal rights, financial literacy, and trauma recovery. The study where he'd taught me about preservation was now an office where women learned to preserve themselves, to recognize their worth, to build honest lives. On the 1-year anniversary of the wedding disaster, a reporter asked to interview me. We sat on the porch, the same porch where Charlotte had confronted Nathan, where so much had fallen apart. "Do you regret how everything happened?" the reporter asked. "Do you wish you'd handled it differently?" I thought about that question for a long time. I regret that it took betrayal to wake me up. I finally said, "I regret that I was so busy building a life in Atlanta that I missed the signs of what was happening here. But do I regret fighting back? No, because if I hadn't, I'd still be invisible. Charlotte would still be trapped, and this house would still be a lie." The reporter gestured at the new sign by the gate, Haven House. "A place to begin again." "What does that mean to you?" I looked at the house. Solid and true. The way my father had envisioned it. It means that sometimes you have to knock down the false walls to find the real foundation. My family built a lot of false walls. We pretended everything was fine. We pretended appearances mattered more than honesty. We pretended that silence was the same as peace. But real peace only comes after you've made noise. After you've told the truth. After you've demanded to be seen. Charlotte joined us on the porch, carrying lemonade like a proper Southern hostess. And we both laughed at the absurdity of it. "Mom would approve of the lemonade," Charlotte said, "but not much else." I nodded. Dad would approve of all of it. We'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Eleanor was living in a small apartment, working part-time at a boutique. A dramatic come-down from her aspirations. She'd sent one letter, addressed to both of us, that we'd read together. It wasn't an apology. Exactly. More of an explanation. She'd grown up poor, she wrote, and she'd spent her life trying to escape that poverty through appearances. She'd thought if she could make us look successful, we'd be successful. She'd thought the house was her ticket to respectability. She'd been wrong about everything, she admitted, but she still didn't seem to understand why. Charlotte had written back. A short note, saying she was working toward forgiveness but wasn't there yet. I hadn't written anything. I didn't know if I'd ever have words for my mother that weren't just rage or grief. Maybe someday. Maybe not. For now, I was focused on the future, not the past. Haven House was thriving. We'd helped 14 women in the first year, providing shelter, legal support, job training, and counseling. Some stayed for weeks, others for months. Each one left stronger than she'd arrived. Each one took something of my father's spirit with her. That belief that honest work builds honest lives. I'd also started taking on restoration projects again. But now I was selective. I only worked on buildings with real historical significance, not vanity projects for wealthy clients. I documented everything, taught workshops on preservation techniques, and mentored young architects who cared about authenticity. I was building a different kind of legacy, one that couldn't be stolen or forged or sold. The money from Nathan's conviction and the venue's back revenues went into a trust for Haven House, ensuring it would survive, even if I couldn't personally fund it forever. Sometimes I stood in my father's study and imagined him seeing what the house had become. I thought he'd be proud. Not because it was perfect or elegant or prestigious, but because it was honest. It was being used for its true purpose, to shelter and protect the walls he'd built, that I'd restored, were finally doing the work they were meant to do. That felt like the real restoration, not just of the house, but of the values that had been lost when he died. Late one evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and thought about the year that had passed. The betrayal still hurt. The loss of my family still ached. There were nights I woke up angry, thinking about all the ways I'd been used, but there were also mornings I woke up grateful. Grateful that the truth had come out. Grateful that Charlotte was safe. Grateful that this house was saving lives instead of being a monument to lies. If I'd never seen that blog post, if I'd never driven back to Savannah, if I'd never fought back, I'd still be sending checks to fund someone else's fraud. I'd still be invisible in my own life. My father used to say that every building tells a story, and you can read that story in its bones. This house had told a lot of stories over the years. Stories of my father's craftsmanship. Stories of my mother's ambition. Stories of Nathan's crimes. Stories of Charlotte's suffering. But now it was telling a different story. A story of survival. A story of women who'd been broken and were putting themselves back together. A story of honest work done by honest hands. And somewhere in those walls, in the foundation my father had laid and I had protected, was the story of a daughter who'd loved a house enough to fight for it, and in fighting for it, had fought for herself. So here's what I learned. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet and constructive. Sometimes it's about creating something good from the ruins of something bad. Sometimes the best revenge is refusing to be erased, refusing to be silent, and refusing to let those who hurt you define what you become. They tried to write me out of the story. I wrote myself back in, and I changed the ending. That's the power we all have, even when it doesn't feel like it. The power to rewrite, to rebuild, to begin again. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible or betrayed or used, I want you to know you're not alone. And if you're still in the middle of your story, if you're still fighting to be seen, keep fighting. The truth is worth it. You are worth it. Like this video if you believe that honesty matters more than appearances. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about taking back what's yours. And comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me about a time you had to fight to be seen. Or a time you rebuilt something that was broken. I want to hear it. Because every story matters. Every voice deserves to be heard. And every life deserves to be built on truth, not lies. Haven House is still here. Still helping. Still giving women a place to begin again. If you want to learn more or support the work, the information is in the description. But more than that, I hope this story inspires you to look at your own life and ask, what false walls am I living behind? What truths am I avoiding? What would it take to rebuild something honest? Those are the questions that changed my life. Maybe they'll change yours too. The house stands as a reminder that betrayal can break you or it can make you, depending on what you do next. I chose to let it make me stronger, wiser, and more committed to living honestly. That's my father's real legacy. Not the house itself, but the values it represents. And that's the legacy I'm building now. One honest conversation. One restored room. One sheltered woman at a time. It's not the story my mother wanted for me. It's not the story Nathan tried to write. But it's my story. And I'm proud of every word. What story are you writing? What would it take to make it honest? Think about that. And then do something about it. That's how change happens. That's how healing begins. One honest moment at a time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, your voice matters. Use it.